Star Wars, best place for below average Star Wars.
Hello there, and welcome to the Star Wars Show, a UK-based Star Wars podcast with in-depth discussions and analysis, always sprinkled with some silliness. I am the Geordie Jedi Pete.
And I am Jason Hondo Ling.
And we are back with a brand new episode of Star Wars. Star Wars is back with a brand new live-action television show on our Disney Plus screens, which is absolutely fantastic. And this episode is going to be us sort of deep dive reviewing episodes 1, 2, and 3 of season 2 of Star Wars Andor. So if you have not watched episodes 1, 2, and 3, we will be talking spoilers, we will be talking details, so pause the podcast right now, go watch the first 3 episodes of season 2 of Andor on Disney Plus, and then come back, press play, and enjoy us in the shenanigans. But before we get started talking about Andor, a few other things have happened. So Revenge of the Sith is, of course, in its 20th anniversary this year, and it is back in cinemas across the globe, including here in the UK. I went and watched it on Friday evening, and it was great to see my screening sold out. And from what I've seen on social media, like friends who are up and down the country, when they went to watch it over the weekend, including today, their screenings are looking pretty chocker. So it's great to see, it's not just on for no reason, it's back in cinemas and everybody's going to watch it, which is fantastic. I know in America it looks like same again, it's making some good money over in America. And also, if you were in Hollywood, I believe at the Chinese Theatre, you were joined by Hayden Christensen and Sam Jackson themselves, and went to a couple of shows and did a bit of a speaking job at the front of the stage. Jason, I know you probably haven't had time to go and watch the anniversary of Revenge of the Sith, but just sort of what's your thoughts on the fact that all of these screenings seem pretty jam-packed, so the hunger is there for it, and what's your thoughts on the fact that some lucky people got to see Anakin Skywalker and Mace Windu themselves in person?
Yeah, it's absolutely awesome, 20 years on, and this film's still packing out the cinema. I believe it actually held some of the more current films off of the top spot for viewings and everything, which just goes to show the thirst and the fans are still there. The fact that Hayden and Samuel L. Jackson turned up, I've seen the video footage of the sort of thing they got up to, and for fans it was absolutely awesome. I think they were even giving out like little lightsabers, and the whole cinema was sort of playing with lightsabers as well as watching the film. So, this. I think Samuel L. Jackson is very much on a I want to do a Mace Windu film at the moment. And I think, obviously, the more he can get out is absolutely brilliant. Shows that the fans still have a thirst for those characters as well. So I think that's absolutely awesome. And I really wish I could have got to the cinema this weekend. Sadly, everything seems to get in the way at the moment. But no, it's really good to see that, especially after what happened with COVID and cinemas struggling, events like this are bringing people back into the cinema experience, which is only good.
No, it certainly was. And I've seen a quote somewhere that in America it's looking at between 30 and 40 million for the whole weekend, which is pretty extravagant for a movie that's 20 years old on its re-release. I think Hayden gets around a lot now, especially over the last few years since the Kenobi series. And then continue with it. So he was at a lot of conventions. He's did a lot of press with the official Lucasfilm, going around in Disney. But to see Sam Jackson, we see him on talk shows and other things, and Star Wars comes up when he mentions it. But I think to see him here, sort of at a Star Wars screening, was really cool to see. And I have heard rumours that Bryce Dallas Howard is very keen on trying to sort of get a project up and running with Samuel Jackson as Mace Windu. Whether that would be a story pre his death in Revenge of the Sith, or whether it would be a post Revenge of the Sith story, and it ties into that legend of Mace Windu surviving. Who knows? But how do you feel about that? Would you love to see Bryce Dallas Howard directing Samuel Jackson in a Mace Windu project, Jason?
Oh, let's face it, some of the stuff that Bryce Dallas Howard has done with the television episodes have been some of the best episodes of Mando and such like. So, yeah, I'm completely happy with that. I think she shows a respect to Star Wars that would mean that it would be in safe hands if she was allowed to do it. I think the way that Samuel L. Jackson obviously adores the character, adores Star Wars, I think it would be a dream team. Obviously, Bryce comes from some real heavyweight film family, and as we know, if you've seen the first season of The Gallery, she's also very close to George Lucas. So again, as we've seen over the years with the relationship with George and Dave Filoni, the respect that these two would give to make sure that it stays within the idea of Star Wars, I think would be brilliant. And I think that's something like that would be, a good way to go, especially if it was done as a film. I think it would be hugely popular. Samuel L. Jackson's a huge draw. And if the story's right and done right, it could be something very exciting.
No, I think it certainly would. For me, I feel that did he survive? Did he not? I don't mind as long as the story's good, but like don't bring him back if it's like not worth it. I think the story has to be worth addressing the point of if he survived or not. Otherwise, if it's not worth it, then just keep it sort of a question mark over it where people can guess still. I think if you're gonna answer that and say he's back, then I think it needs to be a story worth telling. And I'm sure it will be. And I think for him, he's chomping at the bit. He wants to come back, which is of course good. I'm glad people like that. Very high caliber actor, legendary career, and he's very much saying I want to be in Star Wars. He's not shying away from it. He's not trying to downplay it. He's just saying how much he loves it, which is great. Speaking of George Lucas, so it was the Turner Classic Movies Festival over in America, the TCM Festival. Empire Strikes Back was screening there, and George Lucas was on stage, sort of having a sort of question and answer session. It's on TCM's YouTube page. It's quite cool. George just being George. He starts to warm up after a few minutes in, but he talks about sort of everything from America Zoetrope, which was his first company with Francis Ford Coppola, and sort of THX 138 going into American Graffiti, and how him and Francis, started their journey, sort of making movies for the studios, and it's definitely worth a watch. And I think one thing I watch, George looks great. George is getting older, and you can see that, but he's still got his full head of hair. And I said after a few minutes, his charming wit kicks in, and I think George is 80 now, and I think I certainly enjoyed it seeing like new conversations with George because there will be a time, sadly, when we can't have new conversations with George. So it's good to watch these as they come out, and hopefully we get more of them. And I haven't seen any of the new series of Industrial Light and Magic yet, but I hope there's more George in there as well because, like I said, I think we need to make the most of George and anyone else. I think anybody close to you, make the most of everyone that you know and that you appreciate while they're still here, because you never know when, sadly, that will not be the case. But definitely worth checking out that interview on the TCM YouTube channel with George Lucas. Talking Star Wars, we're also talking just about the movie business as well, which was really, really interesting. Especially the bygone time, that was sort of the 70s and 80s in Hollywood. I don't know if you've seen any of that footage or what your thoughts are on us sort of making the most out of, these creators while we've got them and listening to them.
Yeah, no, I completely agree there. I haven't seen the footage yet, but I will look it up later on because, as I've said many times, for me, the documentaries and interviews with the creatives is just as interesting as sitting down and watching the series. I have watched the new Light and Magic, and as I said previously, thoroughly recommend it. And if you want to see it, and it's funny. I know I mentioned it with the Ahmed Best, where he's talking about how he was treated as Jar Jar, and George was very much in that interview. He was more matter of fact, but it was because of his life experience that he could say to the guys, they hated C-3PO to begin with, and now he's most loved. And like again with Jar Jar, he's one of the these days he's one of the most popular characters around. So yeah, it's great to be able to get that insight from the creator, and seeing the documentaries with George. You know, as you say, the more they can capture now, whilst he is at his, you know, still able to do it, is brilliant. So yeah,
Yep, it certainly is. And then last thing for me before we dive into Cassian Andor Season 2 is that probably the best guitarist to ever wear Mandalorian armor, Ian Slater, who's a friend of the show, is about to start a new journey this week, I believe. So we wish you all the best, in your full recovery from what's been going on, but also as you start this new journey in the working world. We hope it's fantastic, and we hope all your colleagues love Star Wars. If they don't, I'm sure you can just sort of serenade them with your lovely guitar skills, and they'll still fall in love with you. But I don't know if you can say anything else better than that, Jason, to wrap it up, to say good luck to Ian.
no, definitely good luck, Ian. Ian's a big supporter of the show, and I know he's doing some training this week, and looking forward to listening to this episode. So I hope you enjoy it, mate, and good luck with everything.
Indeed, indeed. Let's dive in. So we got 3 episodes of Season 2 of Andor, a Star Wars story. They were released on April 22nd, 2025. They're all on Disney Plus now. As I said at the beginning of the show, if you have not watched Andor Season 2 yet, pause the podcast, go watch it, then come back. Otherwise, you're going to have it spoiled for you. If that's your kink and you love having things spoiled for you, then listen ahead and then go back and watch it afterwards, and you can probably think about all the things that me and Jason get wrong here in this episode. But yes, we've got episodes 1, 2, and 3, which is technically episodes 13, 14, and 15 in the overall arc from Season 1 to Season 2. They were all directed by Ariel Kleeman, and they were all written by the series creator Tony Gilroy. I'm going to give sort of a rundown of the 3 episodes, and then we can dive into sort of what's cool. So 1 year after the Ferrex uprising, Cassian impersonates an Imperial test pilot in order to steal a prototype of a new Imperial ship, the TIE Avenger. When he attempts delivery on a jungle planet, he is ambushed by a rogue band of squabbling guerrillas, the Maya Pei Brigade. On the agricultural planet Minarau, Bix, Brasso, Wilman, and B2MO fear detection by the Empire, while in the undocumented employee of a local farmer. On Chandila, Mon Mothma prepares for her daughter's arranged marriage, but is informed by Te Kolma that his financial investments have turned sour as a result of their dealings, and implies he is considering selling her out to the Empire. Vel Sartha asks Luthen for information regarding the whereabouts of her partner and fellow rebel, Cinta Kaz, but he claims to have no knowledge. Orson Krennic oversees a secret meeting of Imperial officers about forcibly mining the resources of the planet Gorman due to its heavy concentration of rare minerals, and it's an initiative to which Deidre Miro is reluctantly assigned. The conflict between the Maya Pei insurgents reaches boiling point, and several members are shot and killed as Cassian is taken hostage. And that's sort of the events of the first episode. I think I sort of want to break the first episode down into 3 things. I think it's Cassian, I think it's Mon Mothma, and I think for this episode it is sort of Orson Krennic and what the Empire are doing. I think let's just dive into Orson Krennic, the Empire, to start with. So Orson Krennic sort of arranged this secret meeting of Imperial officers. Some of them are ISB, some of them are not. There seems to be a mix of people here. There's certainly some salesmen in the room as well, spin doctors, you could say. He mentions the fact Tarkin's not here, and he'll be informed later. And what they're saying is that Gorman, which is very much, it seems, famous for its fashion and sort of materials to build clothing, and it keeps itself proud, sort of separate from the Empire, you could say, it seems. But the planet does have a lot of resources in the ground that it doesn't even mine, because it would probably disrupt the planet. And sort of Krennic, he doesn't say it, but essentially I think they're wanting the resources out of this planet to help with the Death Star project, amongst other things. But What was your thoughts on the Empire in this first episode, in particular Orson Krennic, and then also how that fits in with Deidre?
Yeah, obviously, I discussed this with my friend Jordan, and we were both we weren't expecting almost Orson Krennic to come in as quickly as he did, but it was a brilliant introduction. Obviously, Deirdre um, is in this room where a lot is revealed of what's been plotted. And yeah, as you say, it's quite an interesting meeting, seeing how the Imperials are now working to create what they want, and seeing these two rather dodgy spin doctors. To begin with, I thought, I'm not sure about this, but the more I watch it, because I have watched each episode twice now, um, I think, yeah, it makes sense. This is politics at work, and this is how it, we see politics um, do changes, and people manipulate things, and this is shown perfectly. Krennic is his normal, exactly as we remember him, and all the other Imperials. It just felt like we were going straight back into where we know the Empire would be, and how the plotting is very much taking shape.
Indeed. Yularen is also mentioned in the same sentence as Tarkin as well. So it was a cool callback to sort of who the big players in the Empire are. I also liked how Krennic, was sort of directing things very authoritative here. We've seen him do that in Rogue One, certainly when with other Imperial officials. He seems to not do that as much, particularly when Tarkin's there. And obviously, we've seen what his meeting with Darth Vader was like as well. But it seems that when the big fish aren't there, he feels he's probably the biggest fish, and he certainly projects that. I liked how Deidre almost didn't want to be involved, so she separates herself from the group. She's looking sort of out of the big window, taking in the view, and Krennic seeks her out. And there's also a bit when Krennic's like, "Don't stand here and pretend that you're thinking. Like, I know that you've thought of something before I've even finished speaking." And the reason why Deidre doesn't want to say anything is because she wants to go back to her project. I think she's very much in love with what she's doing, in the areas of the galaxy she's looking at, which she makes clear later. But she sort of tells Krennic up front, what you need a insurgency on Gorman, a rebel cell who are going to do something naughty, do something nasty against the Empire, and then that would allow the Empire to sort of go full whack against Gorman to shut it down. So it's very nasty planning here. And who's to say they don't plant their own cell there and pretend it's rebel and then react against it? Who knows? Time will tell. We obviously have Mon Mothma, who is preparing for this wedding, and I think if you take away the whole tension of the rebellion anyway, I think just the fact that her daughter's getting married, and the reason why that's happening is because she needed to secure the finances in order to sort of build a rebellion. There's a lot of tension there. Although I did find that the tension between her and her husband seemed to not be there as much as it was in season 1 here. Obviously, it's just the beginning though. And the biggest tension is between Mon Mothma and Tay Kolma, who sort of, Tay very much tells her, we sort of set those finances up and that's going great, no one knows anything, but because of the way the galaxies and these rebel cells are attacking, my investments have gone sour, so it needs looking at. We find out that he's lost his wife. He's separated from his wife recently. He's sort of going through a crisis, you could say. And there certainly is a lot of alcohol forming. What was your thoughts on sort of Mon Mothma and sort of where she is in this episode?
Yeah, obviously, for Mon Mothma, everything seems to be getting very dangerous, and she's almost living this double life of working with the rebels, but still this senator and a big part of the social life on Chandrilla. So I think this part of and I know we'll go into it later, that the her life is in a very dangerous situation. Tay Colmer is obviously now, whereas beforehand he was her saviour. Now, obviously, she sort of almost made a pact with the devil, and now it's coming to collect. So obviously, they're this is where Luthen obviously will come in. But I'm quite intrigued by how Luthen's story is going to go, because obviously after this series, we don't know much about what happened to Luthen and his involvement with the rebels. So I've got a feeling his story's going to end badly. And I think things are starting to fall apart for him as well, especially when um, Cassian has sort of almost disappeared on this mission. I think with Mon Mothma's story, it's very interesting how it's going. Like you, yeah, I noticed in this episode in particular, Mon Mothma and her husband seem to be almost, but I think as we see later on, it's almost like a facade that's put on because they're hosting this big event, and as we know from previous series, they put on a persona to hide what they really are doing behind the scenes, or in particular, Mon Mothma's doing behind the scenes.
Yeah, I think something you made a great point about Luthen there, and I think you have to think, and we already know this because of Star Wars Rebels, right? So we do know that whatever the Gorman massacre is and looks like, which we're going to find out here in Andor Season 2, but that has been addressed in Star Wars Rebels, where we know that whatever happens on Gorman, this massacre, it leads to Mon Mothma calling out the Empire and blaming Palpatine by name, and sort of then having to leave the Senate and start a rebellion full time, because she then becomes at risk. So you have to think that she does that. So like Luthen Kia is like seen with her. So he's known as a friend and ally of Mon Mothma. So once Mon Mothma goes against Palpatine verbally and sort of in public, obviously the people who are connected with her are going to be in trouble, I would imagine. So maybe his demise could be linked to that. Maybe not. That's just a thought, but very, very interesting times. And we also have obviously Cassian Andor himself, who, I loved his introduction. He's in the pilot's uniform, the test pilot's uniform on Scion, and he looks fantastic. And he's chatting to the lady who's helping him escape, and she's risking her life for the rebellion here as well. She's got a bit emotion about it. But I love how he takes the time and he's like, you can ask me anything, because you're putting your life at risk for the Empire, just like for the rebellion, sorry, just like I am. So ask me anything. I'm being honest with you. I'm here for you, and sort of we'll get through it together. And I believe in you. I thought it was just great to see that from Cassian, sort of giving that emotional assistance, but also sort of being calm as well to this lady who was starting to get really emotional about it. I love the fact that stealing this TIE fighter doesn't go to plan. If anything we've learned in Star Wars, it's that TIE fighter is probably really awful to pilot. In The Force Awakens, when Finn and Poe Dameron steal that Special Forces TIE fighter, when they try to escape, it's still tied up in the struggle. They have to blast away out the hangar. Similar to what happens here. And obviously they end up getting shot down and crashing on Jakku. And then here, he doesn't crash it, but he almost does. And he has to shoot his way out the hangar. Well, what are your thoughts on sort of the opening sequence and sort of on our first encounter with Cassian since we've seen him a year ago?
Yeah, I thought this was done beautifully, and I think we saw a side of Cassian that obviously, in particular in Rogue One. By the time we get to Rogue One, he's a very different person, and this is the journey that we're going on. And when you see him here, obviously, he's had his first few missions with the rebellion. He's now very much a rebel spy. He's working on this project, and he's now introduced to this young woman, and her fears. You can imagine it. This is someone who's going against what she's supposed to for something that she believes in. And Cassian shows great leadership skills here that I don't think we've seen from him before. Very much, he's always been a lone gunman sort of thing. Whereas now, even when he was with the team in Rogue One, It was, he was very much, they sort of came along for the ride because they necessitated it. Whereas here, we're seeing him giving this young woman the time, explaining how, her fears are perfectly valid. And I thought it was beautifully done, and I thought it was very well done. The acting, I thought, was really good, and I was impressed with it. And I felt it led into then, he had this confidence in that, and then he gets in the TIE Avenger, and you're waiting for him to fly out of there, and he sticks it straight in reverse because he's not properly been trained. And that, for me, was a real laugh out loud moment, which in Star Wars is great when you get those surprise moments where you think, yes, I'm going into action, here we go, and then it all goes wrong. And I thought that was brilliant. It gave a little bit of lightheartedness to an episode that was going down a very dark and gloomy sort of path. I really enjoyed this introduction. Um, for me, it set up the episode and set up what I was hoping for the series. And then obviously seeing him flying off with it, sort of finding his ropes, I, I thought it was really, and the TIE Avenger. Well, I think everyone wants to see a Lego kit of that.
Definitely. And I love how the TIE Venture, it's like a cross between a sort of a TIE Interceptor and then also the TIEs we see Kylo Ren fly sort of throughout the sequel trilogy. I think the TIE Silencer and the TIE Whisperer, maybe I think is the two names for them.
Yeah,
So yeah, I love how it's sort of a blended original trilogy and a sequel trilogy, and it blended the Empire with the First Order, and how the First Order, are building on Imperial designs, like the really good ones. I loved how squeaky clean the stormtroopers were on Sinar. They looked like fresh out the factory with that armor, and then the way Cassian sort of owns them and then Gatling laser guns was really, really spectacle to behold. Obviously on Sinar, it looks like there's a lot of different sort of hangars or sort of base areas on Sinar, and I wonder how many other ships they're working on there. On other, not just ships, but maybe other projects as well. Maybe for the Empire, maybe for other people, but it's sort of left that open as well, which is really cool. We did get 4 years before Baby Y, didn't we? Is that right? As a time frame.
yeah,
So that was really cool to see that sort of as a. I wonder if we'll get that at the start of every episode, like episode 1, episode 4, and so on. The ones that begin the arcs to sort of show us the time jump would be really cool. So we didn't get it anywhere else in the episode. But that was really cool. Obviously, from there, Cassian ends up landing on this planet, which we'll name later. And his pilot's not there. Looks like his pilot's long gone, possibly being killed by these insurgents, the Maya Pay. And these guys are just like, they're just not very good. They're squabbling amongst each other. They're obviously some sort of rebel cell, but like just not organised and acting like children, to be fair. And Cassian's obviously taken hostage, but I love how we see Cassian sort of keeping calm here. He's keeping calm, he's listening, he's sort of learning who the players are, so he can then use that to his advantage later. I don't know what your thoughts were on the Maya Pay. Obviously, I did find them funny. I think that was good. It was quite a tense episode if we didn't have the funniness of these guys here being absolute schmucks. But yeah, sort of, what were your thoughts on the Maya Pay insurgents, and what were your thoughts on Cassian being taken hostage?
yeah. The whole thing was one. There was the only reason they got to take him hostage was obviously he was vastly outnumbered. But then, as soon as the bickering started, you thought this isn't going to end well for these guys because they're so disorganized. And I think this showed perfectly because obviously Cassian mentioned that he knew who they were through the rebellion and everything. And I think it shows the early stages of the rebellion, almost a bit like obviously what we've seen with Saul Guerrera as well. So we've now got another group that are part of the rebellion, but really aren't going to be a lot of help to the rebels unless they can get organised and unless they can get over their bickering. And I think this is brilliant setting up for how obviously guerrilla warfare needs to have leadership and needs to be organized to be able to be effective. So this, for me, set up a lot of where I think the series is going to go. As you say, obviously the episode starts off with the 4 BBY, which sets up perfectly for what we know the series is going to be as we jump every 3 episodes. So I thought this was done really cleverly. They could have been a really strong, efficient team that took him prisoner, but as soon as they took him prisoner, you knew that it was only going to be a matter of time before he got through and escaped them. Obviously, it takes nearly another episode, but it's something that was going to happen. So no, I really liked the inefficiency of these guys.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's a great build to the tension because obviously we've seen sort of, something we haven't spoken about, as part of the Cassian, you've got the planet that Cassian's living on currently, which is Minor Rao. We don't see him there because he's obviously on this assignment already at the beginning. But Bix, Brasso, Willman, and B2MO are there, and obviously sort of illegal immigrants, working on the farms there that feed the Empire, it looks like. So, the Empire are there doing sort of what would the word be? I'm trying to think of what the word would be. They're doing if you know, Jason, help us out with the word.
Oh, the census.
Yeah, so they're checking out
Is that what you?
what's going on there. Yep, and they might be alright, or they might not be. It depends how serious the Empire want to take it. But obviously, it's very shaky ground here, and obviously, we know Cassian probably needs to get back there. Then obviously, he's now been derailed because he was meant to land on this planet. He was meant to land the TIE fighter there, the TIE Avenger, and get in his other ship, and then fly back here to be with his people. But now it looks like he's in a race against time to get back, and he has to free himself from these hostages first and find a ship, or take the TIE fighter. But yeah, that's very much how it ends. Going into episode 2, so episode 1 was called 1 Year Later, and episode 2 is called Sagrona Teema. On the jungle planet, Cassian is held prisoner while the conflict amongst the Maya brigade worsens and the group splits into 2 factions at a stalemate. On Minor Rao, Imperial officers arrive to audit all the work as papers, as Bix, Brasso, and Will arrange to move to a different part of the planet to avoid discovery. On Coruscant, Deidre and Cyril, who are now living together as a couple, prepare for a special event they have been putting off. As the preparations for Leela's wedding conclude, Mon Mothma discusses the possibility of Tay Kolma's defection with Luton, who says they should attempt to ascertain Kolma's price for keeping silent about the rebellion. Cassian slips away from his captors when they become distracted with a territorial challenge and flees the planet in a stolen TIE Avenger, which we do learn the planet is, of course, Yavin 4. Very important to the rebellion. I think let's just dive in here. I was talking about the Empire again first. So, we have Deidre and Cyril, who, we didn't see Cyril in the first episode, I believe. So we find out they're living together here. So in season 1, I thought there was definitely, I was getting vibes, especially in that scene when Cyril saves her from the riots. I got the impression there was definitely tension there. That would be like, couples tension. And don't get us wrong, I think very much Deidre wears the pants in that relationship. She's the dominant one. But here we are on sort of that sort of being confirmed, I suppose. They are indeed living together as a couple. Does again seem to be sort of a Deidre-dominated relationship, possibly, from what we see, from my opinion anyway. But it's sort of one of those things where this was sort of, we're seeing Deidre at home. Yeah, we're spending time in Deidre's life, which I think is important because I think down the lines that someone's going to use this against her. So does somebody give her a choice between sort of Cyril and the Empire? Do maybe Cassian and all that catch Cyril, or like, well, we've got your man to do what we say, and then what does she do in that situation. Is it for the Empire or is it for Cyril? I don't know, but obviously we do get a bit of comedy here with sort of, Cyril's mother, who we met in season 1, sort of quite a controlling mother, is being quite, I don't know what the word would be, sort of belittling Cyril, and I suppose that comes in the next episode. We've just seen preparing for this here, but we get that feeling that Deidre's pretty much the one who's in control here. What were your thoughts on sort of the dynamic between Deidre and Cyril?
Yeah, I think my first reaction was, um, I know when I watched the first season, I was like, oh, here we go. There's another relationship sort of being forced into Star Wars. But then, as I watched these 2 episodes, so 2 and 3 of this season, it sort of more made sense to me, and it was a bit of a slow burn. But it's almost, for me, it's like Cyril has replaced his mother with another more dominant person to still keep his life in check and everything. Obviously, we see, I think it's in this episode that we do actually see Cyril at work as well, where now he's obviously worked his way up. He's a more senior person. So he sort of regained the seniority that he'd had when we first saw him in the first season. So he's sort of clearly gone on a journey that we haven't seen it up until this point, where he's now back. He's escaped his mother, maybe replaced her with Deirdre, but obviously, I think as it plays out, we see Deirdre genuinely cares about him. It's just, I think she, because we discover more about her past, she struggles to show emotion. I think maybe Cyril is sort of beginning to release that emotion, because she clearly wants to build a life with him, because obviously he doesn't want to go ahead with this social event, which I can understand why he wouldn't. But she says, no, we need to. We've been putting it off for long enough. And I thought the dynamic there, the more I think about it, the more it made sense. Although to begin with, it sort of hit me, yeah, I didn't really need this, but it is creating the character of Deirdre and why she is so ice cold. And those revelations start to come out, which I think is an important part of this story.
I think a lot of great points there. Obviously, as I said, we also have the worsening of the situation on Minor Rao. Sort of, what was your thoughts on sort of the depiction of sort of the situation that Bix, Brazo, and Will and B2MO are in here? And obviously, it seems the tension's grown steadily, but the Empire are getting closer, and obviously, we do meet the Imperials face to face in this episode, and we do see the tension that's on the guy who's trying to help them as well.
Yeah, it was this for me. Obviously, in the first episode, it very much been we were picking up where their life was. They'd made this new life. They were still very much on the run, but they were in a comfortable place. Brasso clearly had found himself someone. Bix was working, and Will had found himself someone as well. So it was all a little bit too comfortable until obviously in that first episode when we saw the Imperial ship appear, and all of a sudden, oh, it's catching up with them. And here that tension is really ramping up. Obviously, they're being told that the farmer who they're working for is sort of saying, yeah, we'll sort it. We'll find a way of hiding you, moving you to a different part. You'll avoid the census. And it is you're getting this build up that we know they need Cassian to come back and save the day. So I thought this was really done really well. Again, it's I like the way you can clearly see three different. We're now in the middle part of the arc of this story for this part of the story, and I just like that. You know, there's they've gone from safety to all of a sudden the Empire's here again. So I thought this was done really well.
No, I think it was. It was done really, really well. I think something else that we haven't talked about so far is also Bix's trauma from the torture she went through in season 1. So I think it would have been the first episode actually. It was when sort of he's sleeping, just having the nightmare, and it's the same guy who played the doctor who, put her through that, exhaustive torture therapy. And obviously it's affecting her dreams. So it's definitely, and it was certainly mental health related. I think when we saw the type of torture she was being put through in season 1. And I think that will come into play in season 2 as well. Obviously, we have sort of Mon Mothman sort of, there was some cool moments here. I think, obviously like the preparations for the wedding are starting to conclude. We're getting up to the big day now. Tensions are rising, as in Tay Colmar's getting more and more needy and more panicked and more on drunk, it seems like, at these events. And he's sort of saying, look, I need sorted out. And, she's already told him in the last episode, I'll see you on Coruscant and we'll sort it out. But I love here she meets with Luthen. Luthen sort of insinuates that could just have him take him off the board. He doesn't say it in so many words, but that's the impression I got, was that he was insinuating that we could just have him disappear and it wouldn't be a problem anymore. And Mon obviously, finds that idea disgusting and does not entertain it at all. What were your thoughts on sort of on Mon, and Luthen and Tay Colmar's sort of desperation?
Yeah, obviously, we see more of the complexities of the Chandrilla community in the wedding, and obviously, as we've said, Mon's playing this social character that needs to be there, but obviously her thoughts are very much with what's going on in the bigger picture. But obviously she wants to enjoy the wedding, but at the same time, you've got Tay Colmer who is falling to pieces in front of us, and Luthen can see this guy's a dangerous, dangerous part of this story. Obviously, Mon's always considered him a close friend. Her husband insinuates that they were more than friends, although she denies this. And then Luthen is there plotting as he always is, and that in the long run, Luthen will make the decision that Mon, because she hasn't completely embraced what she needs to do to make sure that this war's won, he will make the decision if it's necessary. So he's basically given her the option: find out his price, we'll sort it. Otherwise, it's going to need to be dealt with in another way. And obviously, this disgusts Mon, but I think because of the way Luthen is, he sees the more practical side of war. He understands war, and he knows that if you're going to win it, you've got to make the hard decisions.
He certainly does. And then also on this jungle planet, which we now know as Yavin 4, it's just crazy. I don't know if you've ever read the story Lord of the Flies.
Yeah.
So essentially where these kids are left stranded on an island and sort of how fast it depicts into sort of chaos. There's the sort of ruling factions and things like that. But yeah, this had a lot of Lord of the Flies-esque to me. I think the way these two groups have gone about it, one group has Cassian who can fly the TIE fighter against the planet. The other group have the TIE fighter. And that's sort of where it sort of slips away. But they start having this game of almost rock paper scissors. Almost, I thought it was going to be like a fight to the death because they even have seconds, but it seems to be this game of rock paper scissors in space. Cassian's able to escape. They end up sort of killing each other as well as sort of dealing with the whatever these beasts are that are attacking them as well. What were your thoughts on Cassian's escape? On sort of how these rebels just throw it all away. Basically, they allow Cassian to escape because they're so stupid. And what was your thoughts on that sweet Yavin 4 reveal?
Yeah, no, this was done so cleverly. We've seen how ineffective these lot are as a group of rebels anyway, and then the fact that they've got to this point, as you say, I thought, oh, we got a big fight coming up here. This is going to be really awesome. We're going to see these guys fight it out to see who gets to the top, and then they start playing rock paper scissors, and it's like, hang on. So I think that was really cleverly done. It sort of got you all excited and then took that excitement away. But then because of these creatures turning up and Cassian's just like, right, my chance, I'm out of here. And off he goes. And it's like, it was just farcical, but at the same time, completely believable. And as I say, this shows perfectly how we are at the early stages of the rebellion. They know they need to rebel, but no one knows how to do it and how to do it effectively. So I was really enjoying this, and their ineffectiveness, I think, just spelt out how far the rebels need to come to be effective. And I think we see that as well in the TV series Rebels. We see some great rebel moments, but we also see some moments where our brilliant rebels just don't grasp what they need to do. And I'm sure that is the complexity of a war.
No, it certainly is. Episode 3 is called Harvest, and I think that's a very fitting term considering what is happening on Minor Rao. So Cassian makes contact with Claire Markey. So Claire is sort of Luthen's right hand woman. She deals with all the communications and stuff, and just quite uptight a lot of the time. And he's able to ascertain the danger his friends are on, on Minor Rao. Deidre and Cyril host Cyril's mother, Edie, for dinner, during which Edie repeatedly belittles Cyril, prompting Deidre to forcibly establish limitations on his mother. On Trandrila, Leda is married to Staken Skulden as arranged, and the ceremony is followed by a reception. As the Ferrex expats prepare to leave Minor Rao, Imperial officer Lieutenant Cruel attempts to rape Bix, but she kills him after a bloody altercation. As the conflict spirals further, Brasso is killed by a stormtrooper, and Cassian arrives on the TIE Avenger and kills all the Imperial troops. Cassian, Bix, and Will flee on the TIE Avenger. Having been unable to come up with a price to ensure Kalmar's silence, Luthen informs of Mothma has decided to have him killed. Mothma soulfully drinks and dances, while Vel watches Kalmar get taken away by Cinta. So Cinta is, of course, Vel's sort of love interest from season 1 as part of the heist. And she's obviously still working for Luthen in other places. I think let's just talk about sort of the Bix's situation here. So, in the previous episode, Lieutenant Cruel he'd been down and been very creepy around her. Asked about her husband quite a lot when he wasn't there, and asked about would let her go somewhere fancy for dinner. He's quite. He's probing the creep factor was very high, shall we say? When he was definitely probing those areas, and then here he comes by, and he's just ready to full on. Well, basically, he attempts to sexually. He does sexually assault her, and he's trying to rape her. And we get some moments here, especially when he's got her face up against the mirror, where it's very similar to sort of what was going on in her torture in season 1, I thought. Attempted rape is the worst thing that can happen, but when it ties into trauma you've had previously as well. It's tenfold for Bix, bless her. And I think it was done quite well in this episode. I think the seriousness of it, and how awful it was very much on show, but they also were able to pull it back a bit, and they didn't make it too graphic. It was violent and graphic enough to get the message that this is the worst thing that can happen, without going too far, I suppose. And it just does paint the picture of the Empire abusing their rights, as officers, or as a government. They're going in, they're taking advantage of not just people and money, but they are attempting to sexually assault women, which is not good. What was your thoughts on on the scene? I think, I'm not sure if it came with a warning beforehand, but I think for me, it was. I wouldn't say it was. Yes, I would actually. It was a hard thing to watch because of that. Should be a hard thing to watch, and I think it probably should come with a warning, just based on anybody who's sort of, sexual assault survivors, I suppose, and people who've been through that or witnessed that, like that could trigger them, I suppose. But yeah, just talk us through how the Empire here are laid bare to be the evil bastards that they are.
Yeah, for me, this was done very cleverly. It was done. The character, the guy playing Lieutenant Kroll, did a brilliant job of coming across as creepy, manipulative. His aim was very clear when we first met him. And this is the atrocities of war spelt out. This is what is so bad in a situation when you've got a dictatorship. We've got this group of people that think that they have the right to everything, and they don't care who they hurt or who they use in the process. The scene itself was brutal. It was a very, very well filmed sequence where you could see, you thought is, and it was uncomfortable to watch. It was scary to watch, and this woman, Bix, had always been a strong character, and you could see that she was really in a tight spot here, and she fought, and like you say, obviously triggered by wounds that had already been inflicted on her. She fought back, and right, in the end, Lieutenant Kroll got exactly what he deserved. So it was of just. I think it was something that needed to be shown, because obviously this series is very much about why a rebellion needs to happen, and the brutality of the Empire needs to be shown. Previously they're the bad guys, they shoot people, da da da. We know that they've got enforcers that are really evil, and this guy, he's a lieutenant. He's a middle rank. He's there, and he's abusing whatever position he's got, which, as we know, happens in real life a lot. And I think the way they showed it was done to the point that it really was a scary part of the episode. And I'm sort of, I hope Bix gets a break at some point, because throughout this she really has had a hard time. And obviously her and Cassian, obviously eventually he turns up to save her and save the guys that are left. For me, the loss of Brasso, he was a brilliant character. And obviously when he actually got killed, I thought, oh, that hurts already. But that's the brutality of war. You lose some great people. And that, I think, was shown brilliantly in this episode. For the opening part of this, four trilogies that we're going through, I think this really did end to the point that you're like, oh, this is the brutality of war, and this is why this rebellion needs to happen.
Yeah, and I think it was also, the cost, so if Cassian hadn't gone this mission, he might have been here and things might have gone down differently. But he was on that mission for the rebellion. It's like, you are sacrificing yourself, and it goes back to that thing of like, what is a perfect Jedi? And, the real answer to that is sort of being selfless and committing selfless acts. And Cassian sort of being away on that rebellion business to sort of steal that TIE Avenger, perhaps, meant that one of his friends couldn't escape here, and you see that tension in his face when he takes off. I love how in Brasso's last moments, I think when he is captured, he takes a moment to sort of to start on the farmer who's been looking after them, as if to try and protect the farmer. He knows that the Imperials be like, well, how long these people been there? Who's been helping them? And he thinks Brasso thinks selflessly in the moment as well, sort of to protect the farmer. I don't know if you thought, because I've heard different people say different things. My opinion was that he was going out there to show animosity towards the farmer, so that the Imperials would think that they weren't friends, and therefore spare the farmer. I saw some people saw it was his reaction, and actually the farmer did actually dob them out.
Yeah, I think you're dead right there, because I had I actually, when I first watched it, thought, yeah, it doesn't make sense. He wouldn't. He's been helping them. He's been planning. Why would he suddenly turn on them? And then, yeah, I think you're right. Brasso did that to protect the farmer, and it was done. And also, obviously, the woman that clearly Brasso had been in a relationship with, at the same time she was there, it was clear he was like setting himself up to be alone. They didn't know anything about this. This is so he was protecting them. Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because I probably would have been really confused by this.
Yeah, so I think that was good. He was doing his best to protect the people who had protected him, and his friends. So Brasso obviously dies. We see sort of Bix, Will, and Cassian flee on the TIE Avenger. What is your thoughts on the fate of B2MO?
This is the thing that worries me mostly. Is this the last time we're going to see BT? Um, which sort of makes sense, because I'm wondering if in the next episode we're going to be introduced to K2SO. And the fact that we know B2's not there when we meet Cassian in Rogue One. I think this could be the end of his story.
Quite possibly. I think what we did see B2 in these 3 episodes was that he was very needy for Cassian. He mentioned Cassian a lot, and he wanted to get Cassian back, which was great to see. And who knows, we'll see B2MO next. But the good news is we didn't see him get destroyed or attacked by the Empire, at least. So that is a positive. And maybe he pops up and helps the rebellion in other places. I think K2SO is very much a droid that Cassian can take into, war-torn areas and sort of dangerous situations where B2MO could be more helpful in, base operations for the rebellion, maybe. But time will tell. Obviously, on Trangela, the wedding happens. Mon sort of gives a speech to Lida before they get married to say, we can say no here, but it's a bit like, you can't, Mon, because everyone's outside and the pressure's on you, and also you've set up all your money and stuff for the rebellion, so you have caused this. You have to sort of take some responsibility for that, I thought. Mon was maybe trying to pass some off there, I thought, in my opinion. She's still a great character and a great leader, but, everybody has their flaws, and this is one of them, I think. What was your thoughts on the wedding as a whole, and what was your thoughts on sort of a drunk Mon in the club dancing?
Yeah, it was quite interesting to see the way the wedding was done. Um, we it was very much played out so that we were experiencing a different culture, which is, there are so many different cultures, so many different beliefs. To see this culture of Chandrilla and see what their wedding ceremony was quite interesting. Obviously, everything at this point is falling apart for Mon. We get the point where Takoma is took away, and I don't think somehow we're going to see him again. So that's been sorted without her. It's been took out of her hands because it was a situation that nothing. It was the only way it could be sorted, really. Which again is the one of the complexities of war. Sometimes, if you've got a weak link, it has to be took out, which is what has happened here. And yeah, seeing her in the club, a lot of people were like, "Oh, this is crazy. Why is this in Star Wars?" This was us seeing Mon Mothma almost breaking down. You know, everything's got on top of her. She's let her guard down. She's got drunk, and she's out there, and she's just going absolutely crazy. It's her letting out all of the emotions that she can't let anyone else see, because otherwise she will reveal what she's up to. So this is, it looks completely out of place, but actually it isn't. It is exactly what she needs to do to get through this. And it's when you see Colmer get into the car, or the speeder, or whatever, and you see Cinta, you know that this has all been played out and it's all been sorted. And obviously, Mon Mothma by this point knows. So I thought it was really clever. I thought it was a good way of showing that this woman has got emotion. Normally we don't see that with Mon. This was a big part of her that I thought was really really cool, and it needed to be there to show again the complexities and the effect that war has on people.
Definitely. I think one of the things I noticed was that we see her continually drinking the drinks as if she's trying to numb her pain inside of her. And also, when she's doing this sort of, it's quite intense dancing, but everybody's going round one way and she's going the other. So she's very, even though she's in a room full of people at her daughter's wedding, she's very much alone. She can't tell anybody what she's going through. She can't tell anybody what they've been talking about, the plans and stuff. She's very much alone in this moment, and she's sort of coping the only way she can. And I did notice her husband like clocks that. He notices her across the room. So I think that might come to conversation later. He does say her sort of unwinding and going berserk on the dance floor, but he also notices that I think she is sort of going the opposite way to everybody else. What's your thoughts? Well, as you've said, there, we do see sort of take almost had too much to drink. He goes to leave, and we see Cinta be his driver. He queries where his normal driver is, and Cinta says, they're not available, I'm taking you. And he's that drunk, he doesn't care. And, we might not see him actually die, but I imagine he is going to his ends there. We also have the situation on sort of, it's less intense, I suppose, than what we've been talking about, but on Coruscant, we have the meal between Cyril, Deidre, and Cyril's mother, Edie, where Cyril's mum's just being an awkward mother-in-law almost, and she is belittling Cyril. When Cyril leaves the room because he's quite stressed, Deidre just sort of has already read the situation using that ISB techniques. The same things that Krennic loved about her in season 1, she's used here, and she's very much profiled what Edie probably wants, and that's just to be involved in her son's life a bit more. And Deidre very much says, "Stop what you're doing because you're belittling him, and there's no reason to do that. I will make sure he calls you, and I'll make sure he visits." And because she's already profiled that's what Edie wants, and Edie's like, "Okay, yes, no problem." And then when Cyril comes back, sort of they're the best of friends because Edie's happy she's getting what she wanted, and obviously Deidre's been able to, sort that out. What was your thoughts on this situation here?
Yeah, I thought this was brilliantly played out, and Edie for me is the character that everyone just loves to hate. She just turns up, and you just think, oh, you can understand why Cyril was dreading her turning up, and straight away she starts, whereas she should be happy that he's moving on with his life and he's found someone, and that it's just picking at everything that could go wrong and all this. And as you say, that meal where she sits down and obviously Cyril's left the room, and Deirdre goes, right, stop it now, sorted. And she takes control, but it is, again, you can see it is. I suddenly started to realise that she does care about Cyril, and she's taking over, and she's, you know, like you say, she's clearly done her research, because as always, we hear about Uncle Ono, who we've heard, he's this mysterious character, and Deirdre basically says, "Yeah, I've looked at his file. He's a criminal. He's no good. You really don't want to be that proud of him because he will bring you down." And so she puts Edie straight in her place. And then obviously Cyril comes back into the room, and it's like a completely different situation. I think if that had happened to me, I'd have probably just sort of looked and probably walked back out of the room and come back in again just to see what was going on. So yeah, I thought this was done really cleverly, really developed the characters, and I'm looking forward to seeing almost what happens with the relationship as it goes on, because I've got a feeling they've set this up. We're going to see more and more of this as we head into the series.
Yeah, I think for me, they're setting up the way, they're showing that they obviously care about each other, in their own unique imperial way. It's a weird relationship, but it's certainly, you can feel that there is care in there. And again, I think they're setting up the way they've sort of give Deidre something to lose here, and something that can be, that the rebels can use against her, I suppose, or that Krennic could use against her, I suppose. If he wants something from her and she won't give him it, he could sort of be, well, I know about Cyril, so we could do something there, and that would obviously make her vulnerable. And also, I love the way this episode ends. It ends with sort of, we get sort of the scene of Mon Mothma dancing in reverse, the opposite direction to everyone else. Clearly alone. She's in a room full of people, but mentally she's clearly alone, and she's in despair, and she's dealing with it in sort of a wild way. And then we also see Cassian, he's flying his two remaining friends away from Minor Rao. And, you can see in his face, he's lost. He's lost his friend Brasso, who not only was his friend, Brasso always had Cassian's back, even on in season 1, and then even here in season 2, and I think he knows how much of a good person Brasso was. And he knows that he's lost them in this battle against the Empire. Sadly, we end with our characters very much sort of feeling the emotion, feeling lost, and almost, nothing will ever be the same for Mothma again. Her trying to fight evil has led to her daughter getting married, and possibly our friend getting murdered, and her feeling never more alone. And then obviously Cassian's, never been the same from this point on, because obviously Brasso's gone again. That's what he's given up for the rebellion. They've both given up so much for the rebellion, and we're only at the end of the first 3 episodes. I think there's going to be more to give up, sadly. Star Wars is tragedy, as they say over on the Sky Talkers podcast. Is there anything about these 3 episodes that we haven't covered that you want to talk about, Jason?
I'm trying to think now. There's something. The scenes where Cassian is very much on his own in the TIE fighter, floating in space. I think that showed his one, his desperation, and two, again, it can all go drastically wrong for Cassian, but he will find a way to sort it out eventually.
Hopefully. I think the only thing I want to comment on is obviously Claire Markey, who is obviously Luthen's sort of right-hand woman. She handles all the communication. She took the communication from Cassian in this episode. She's also quite firm. It hinted maybe that her and Vel maybe have a past, but maybe don't. I certainly would ship that as a relationship if that was the case. I did like the fact that when we did see when Claire was looking to do communications with Cassian, and she went through sort of the front of the shop again. Again, there was a lot of like rare artifacts from throughout the Star Wars galaxy on display. And I think on multiple watches they will become quite clear. I think StarWars.com have put some trivia up about, well, the episode in general, but the TIE Avenger. They've said the TIE Avenger prototype design was in part initially inspired by Kylo Ren's TIE Whisper from Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker. The TIE Avenger was first featured in 1994 TIE Fighter computer game from LucasArts. So the TIE Avenger has been seen before in 1994's TIE Fighter computer game from LucasArts, which is quite cool. And I also do believe, I'm not quite sure if you've seen it, it popped up on my YouTube feed, I haven't watched it yet, but it looks like there's a, looks like they're doing their own recap episodes, similar to what Rebels Recon was to Star Wars Rebels.
Cool.
So I don't know how much detail is going to go in because I haven't watched it yet. I'm just trying to find it, and it doesn't look like they've tweeted about it, to be fair. But it did, when I was on YouTube earlier, I sort of did. I did see that. So that could be very cool to watch. Going into the next 3 episodes, so on April 29th, 2025, we will get the next 3 episodes. Excuse me, episodes 4, 5, and 6. Ariel Kleeman is back directing those 3, but they will be written by Bio Willimon, who was, of course, he wrote some in season 1, but he's also, for me, he's pretty much the writer on House of Cards for Netflix, which was pretty awesome. So I'm excited for them next 3, and obviously with his political nature and the shows he's wrote in the past, I think we could be seeing a lot more things. Obviously, episode 1, I feel, in this series, we got the Empire and Krennic and the scheming, and then after that, in season 2 and 3, the Empire was mainly just, like, from the characters we know, it was mainly just Deidre. Do you think Krennic will be back in the next 3 and we'll get to see the Gorman massacre beginning to sort of get planned?
Yeah, I think this will move I think this will be heading towards us finding out what is going to be the Gorman massacre, what the Imperials are up to, because for me, I have a feeling that we are going to see, obviously, the Gorman massacre before the final 3 episodes. So I think it's leading up to that, and I think then the final 3 episodes will be what happens after Mon Mothma has had her big attack on the Emperor. I've got a feel. I'm going to put it out there now that I've got a feeling that they're keeping it quiet, but Ian McDiarmid is going to appear as the Emperor at some point. I think he's going to appear.
No, I think that's very, very interesting. We'll see. So it is called. So it's Andor season 2 declassified. So this is a video that's got up on the Star Wars YouTube channel. And the cast and crew of Andor take us behind the scenes for the first 3 episodes of season 2. The second season of Andor is now streaming on Disney Plus. So it looks like, yeah. So it's almost going to be like they're talking about the first 3 episodes of this season. It's 11 minutes long, so there could be some very cool details in there. Definitely worth watching. Once you've watched the episodes, of course. Is that something you're interested in, seeing sort of the cast and crew talking about the episodes as we watch them? Which I think, instead of waiting until the end and us getting it sort of as a one-off documentary, we get 3 episodes and then we're getting the behind the scenes on 3 episodes and then so on and so forth. Do you like that, or would you rather have it all as a one at the end?
No, I think that's pretty cool. Obviously, as I think that would be interesting. In that, I love behind the scenes talk anyway, and I hope it's not just simply telling us what we already know. So I'll definitely have a look at that and see what it is, because I love a good documentary.
Yeah, and I wonder how close it'll be to like that Rebels Recon type of feel. Time will tell, I suppose. Definitely worth watching. At the beginning of the episode, I was obviously talking about Revenge of the Sith numbers. So Variety have actually tweeted just recently. So Revenge of the Sith's re-release earned $25.2 million in America. It collected another $70 million internationally. So it's currently at a galactic $42 million global tally over the weekend. So absolutely fantastic news, and just showing that cinemas are alive and well, and Star Wars in the cinemas is alive and well. Anything else, Andor, you want to talk about, Jason?
No, I think I'm just looking forward to the next 3 episodes. As I mentioned to Pete earlier, I did get up at 2:30 in Wednesday morning to watch all 3 episodes before I went to work, and I will be doing the same this week.
Good, good. And then how much are you begging for a TIE Avenger Lego kit?
Oh yes, definitely. If they don't do one, I will sob like a baby.
Awesome stuff. Awesome stuff. I think we've covered sort of the other Star Wars news that's been going on at the beginning of the episode. I know that there's some awesome charity work you wanted to cover, Jason.
Yeah, I've got to give a shout out to the guys from the Mando Mercs, Foxy Clan, Simon, Annie. I'm trying to find the other two names. Uh, Sorry, guys, I didn't mean to do this. Poor planning on my part. Yeah, Simon, Annie, Jonathan, and Joshua are doing the race for life on May the 4th. So, a very good time to do it. And they will be raising funds for Cancer Research UK. They will be running the race in full armor, which, guys, if the heat starts getting hot like it is, good luck on that. But yeah, I was hoping to go down and support them, but sadly I won't be able to. But if you do want to sponsor them, the uh, fundraising is fundraise.cancerresearchuk.org/team/Foxy clan MMCC. So, and I'll send that through to you, Pete, if that's all right. So we'll put that on the notes so that if anyone does want to sponsor the guys. But yeah, they're doing an amazing thing. Obviously, I also know that Jez, the running stormtrooper, wasn't out in armor, but did do, I believe, marathon in Japan whilst he was over there. So he managed to get a marathon in whilst also going to Star Wars Celebration. And at the same time, I believe he's then come back and instead of running the marathon as a competitor, so to speak, he was working as a guide for I believe it was a lady who was running that was blind. So I know that's something that Jazz is now doing, that he's working with other people, helping them achieve their marathon dream. So congratulations to Jazz on all that work as well. And I look forward to hearing how that went for him.
No, I think it certainly will be very exciting to hear about all of that. Any Star Wars purchases this week before we wrap things up?
I did get some more Star Wars Unlimited cards, getting a little bit obsessed. Looking forward to sitting down, going through exactly what I've got. But yeah, and also some of the Game Genics tokens, so that when I go round to my mates to play, we don't have to worry about dice and everything. So it's a proper Star Wars Unlimited experience. And I did visit the new store for Jedi Archives, and what Ben's doing down there is very exciting. The store is now pretty much up and running. The next stage will be the gaming area, which I know Ben's getting ready to get started on, which is the floor below where the store is. But yeah, if you're in Dorchester and you get a chance to go to Antelope Walk and experience the new Jedi Archives, I can definitely recommend it. It's full of Star Wars goodness, and there's even a coffee machine and somewhere to sit down and relax whilst you enjoy perusing the stuff.
Awesome stuff. I ordered 2 t-shirts from Amazon, who are also the official store for Star Wars Celebration Japan 2025, with the ILM anniversary logo on. I've not opened it yet, but that'll be coming to TikTok. You'll see how that looks when I do open them, and hopefully they fit nice and good. But other than that, that is the only Star Wars purchases from me. Jason, any closing messages, and where can the people find you on social media?
Just carry on enjoying everything Andor and everything Star Wars related. Obviously, next week, not only do we get Andor, but a week today, because we're recording on the 27th, we get to enjoy May the 4th and Star Wars Underworld, which I cannot wait. Tales of the Underworld, sorry. And as always, at Hondo Ling.
And you can find myself on X, formerly known as Twitter, and on Instagram at Geordie Jedi Pete. I'm also on Blue Sky at Geordie Jedi Pete. You can find the podcast on X at Boz Star, and you can find the podcast everywhere else, including Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, everywhere else at Star Wars Podcast. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please leave us a 5-star review. A lovely little sentence. It keeps me and Jason smiling all day. Only takes you a few moments to write, and it does help people find the show. And if you are listening on any of the other wonderful podcast applications out there, there is a lot now, and it has the feature to leave a review. Leave us a top review, all of the stars, a lovely sentence. Again, it keeps us smiling all day. Only takes you a few moments, and it does help people find the show. And if you are leaving reviews, share them with us on social media, and we will perhaps send you a goodie pack out to help with the positivity. Thank you for listening, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this episode and us talking Star Wars. Hope you enjoyed Cassian Andor Season 2, the first 3 episodes. We'll call me for the next 3, and to be talking about those next week. May the Force be with you all. And remember, always tell that to Kanja Club.